Hi, Jeralyn.
Hi, Ann.
Well, we should introduce ourselves for the podcast audience since they can't see us. They won't recognize us. I'm Ann Althouse, and I'm a blogger at a blog called Althouse. Just Google Althouse, and you'll get there. And I'm a law professor at the University of Wisconsin. And tell us about yourself.
I'm Jeralyn Merritt. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Denver, and I blog at TalkLeft, The Politics of Crime, which is TalkLeft.com.
Right. Now, we were both up very late last night, but I happened to have been out at a jazz club at the Village Vanguard listening to a jazz great named Charlie Hayden. It was great, and I didn't get home till late, but I hear something went on last night that I missed on television, and I don't think it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame night on American Idol. It was this other thing. Tell us about it.
Well, I started so early yesterday, hours in advance of when the polls closed. And, you're blogging and you're live blogging and then the polls close, you update with the results, and then Indiana just wasn't coming in. This one county, Lake County, which is in the northwest corner of Indiana, it's where Gary, Indiana is. The results just weren't coming in.
So that's right next to Chicago.
It's right next to Chicago. But it ended up putting, all of a sudden people were speculating, the pundits on TV, well, maybe Obama will pull out Indiana after all. And nobody could figure out why the votes weren't coming in. And then CNN got the mayor of Hammond, Indiana, which is also in Lake County on. His name is Tom McDermott. And the guy was just such a mensch. He was it for me last night and for my readers. And he came out and said, well, wait a minute. I turned my votes in at 6:30 p.m. and, we're now after midnight Eastern time. And he said all the other mayors I talked to did as well. And every mayor in Lake County, except for the mayor of Gary, supported Hillary. So we don't understand why these votes aren't coming in. Then they came in with the first votes, and it was 27,000 votes, and they were 75% for Obama. And it turns out that what the mayor of Gary, Indiana said was, we had 11,000 absentee ballots, so we couldn't turn in any ballots until we counted those by hand, and we sent in the first ones we had. Well, he sent in the ones from Gary, Indiana, where Obama was favored to win. He didn't send in the ones from the rest of the state with the other mayors that said they all voted for Hillary. And Wolf Blitzer and John King got all over the mayor of Gary saying, well, wait a minute, why couldn't you send in the other votes other than the 11,000? And why did you only send in the ones from Gary that were going to favor Obama? And he really didn't have an answer, but the mayor of Hammond was just so magnanimous, and he was so, he wouldn't say there was anything fraudulent going on. He just said it had the appearance of impropriety. It was giving Lake County a black name, and come on, we don't believe that it's just the 11,000 votes. This was Obama's backyard, Gary, Indiana. Anyway, it was like one of my readers said, oh my God, I want to marry this mayor. He is so great. So it was the one highlight in the whole evening that this mayor of Hammond came on all principled and taking on this mayor of Gary, who really had no justification for withholding the count.
Well, sounds like I missed something, but what is the situation today?
Oh, well, the situation today is that Hillary won, Indiana. She only won it by 2 points. And
so there's no further effort to try to drag more votes out of Gary, Indiana and change it. It's resolved. We know the outcome.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much that it wasn't resolved. It was the delay in the votes coming in. And you had to, everybody's going, why would he delay it? There really wasn't a good reason. But when you think of some of the effects of it, for example, Hillary had just given her speech and asked for people to go to her website and donate money. And yet all of a sudden, people that might otherwise have done that are thinking, oh, wait a minute, she really didn't pull out Indiana yet. Obama still has a chance. We better wait.
So you're saying that seemed to have undercut her in her efforts to fundraise following this victory, albeit an awfully marginal victory. And also, doesn't it hurt Obama if, this city that is next to Chicago, and he's from Chicago, you create this sense that maybe there's corruption or things aren't on the up and up, How does that help Obama?
It didn't help Obama. And the mayor of Gary, Indiana, as I wrote, he just got he gave the city a black eye last night. There was no reason for it. He should have just released the votes from the voting machines as he got them, as he got them from all the other cities in the county. And instead, and not just waited until his 11,000 were counted so he could report his total for Gary. It was just unnecessary, and it just didn't look right. There's, no one was saying there was fraud. No one was saying, it was illegal. It put a black eye on it. And it was mostly just that the mayor of Hammond was trying to be fair. He was trying to, but on the other hand, he was concerned. He's going, I turned my votes in at 6:30. So did the other mayors. We all talked. Why aren't they being reported?
You said twice, used the expression a black eye. Now, Gary is an overwhelmingly black city.
Oh, no, I think
I know it's just an expression, but there's sort of a sense that are you creating an insinuation that things are mismanaged? Is the mayor of Gary black, and is the population overwhelmingly black?
I think the mayor. Yeah, there's a lot of black voters in Gary, Indiana, and yes, the mayor is black, but that doesn't have anything to do with a black eye. I mean, I'm using a black eye in the sense that. You get a bad mark.
No, I understand the expression. I'm just saying that there seems to be a suggestion there that, I don't know. I'm following the racial theme in the election, and I just think that seems to be almost an innuendo there that either black people are mismanaging their city or something of that sort.
No. I don't think there's any suggestion that this was some kind of racial thing. I think this was just the mayor of Gary was the only mayor in Lake County who supported Obama. He did a tremendous get-out-the-vote effort for Obama. He's also, I understand, the chair of the Lake County Democratic Party, and he ended up in control of when the vote tally was going to be released, and he didn't release it timely. And the effect of that was to end up creating doubt as to whether Hillary was actually going to win the entire state of Indiana. And he kept everyone on pins and needles for 2 hours. Yeah. It was just really unnecessary. And so that's why I said, and it's like, the mayor of Hammond said, this is creating the appearance of impropriety. It's making Lake County look bad in the eyes of the nation, and there's no reason for it.
Yeah, I wish I had seen that, because to me, I'm just getting a feeling from this that there's a sort of a dynamic between Hillary and Obama supporters where there's a sense trying to be created that Obama is not playing it straight, or there's sort of a Chicago-style corruption behind him, and that we can't trust the votes for him, and that there's something, that you're trying to drive a sort of a subconscious wedge in there.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, we started out talking about how long the night was. And this mayor made the night so much longer. Yeah. And you could tell it with the pundits all on TV. I mean, all three networks, they were like, well, we can't call Indiana yet. And we know why we can't call Indiana, but we're not going to say it. And we have to wait. And then after everybody is breathlessly waiting for these Gary, Indiana results, the first ones come in and they're 75% for Obama. In other words, they were just the Gary portion of the state, of the county. And so what I'm saying is he wore everybody out, and it was unnecessary. The votes were not released timely. But Obama's campaign had nothing to do with it.
As Obama recently said about Jeremiah Wright, maybe something about the spotlight attracted him. Here's this mayor who I assume isn't on the national stage very often, and suddenly all eyes were on him.
Yeah, and he did a terrible job of explaining himself.
And
it's unusual when you see somebody like Wolf Blitzer or John King start grilling this mayor about the vote total and saying to him, your excuse about the 11,000 absentee ballots just isn't adding up. And what does that have to do with why you couldn't report the rest of the votes in the county?
Well, that sounds grim. and sounds long. Maybe that was still going on when I got home. Was that going on after midnight?
Yeah, it was going on after midnight, and it was just wearing. I mean, it was wearing, the commenters out.
You can skip the whole thing and read it the next morning, But you must have gotten people going on your blog site. I mean, it's a big traffic day for you, and it's a happening place. TalkLeft on the night of the primary, right?
Yeah, it was a huge traffic day. But the funny thing is that it really picked up around 10 o'clock at night. I mean, it was big all day. But once that Lake County thing started coming in, the comments were just flooding the site.
Well, what kind of comments were they making? Were they mocking this poor mayor? This horrible mayor?
They weren't mocking him. They were just talking about what is going on here. Why did he do this? This is so unfair. And, they were very, very upset about it. The comments that claimed that there was fraud, I just deleted them. I would go through and just delete them.
So you have a heavy hand. You delete a lot of comments.
Yeah.
If somebody were insulting him or if there were racial comments, you would take all of those out, right?
Right. I delete insults, I delete name calling, and I delete anything that calls somebody a racist. I don't want my name associated with that, and that's just going to come up in Google, and it's just not worth the hassle. So you have to be civil.
Oh, was I incivil before when I said that about the black guy? You would have deleted me if I was a comment.
I would have deleted that, yeah. I think that was that was really kind of an unwarranted stretch.
Okay. Well, anyway. Don't you think, given the slimness of Hillary Clinton's margin and Barack Obama's strong win in North Carolina, isn't it quite obvious that Hillary Clinton's campaign is over? She's lending herself, $6 million it came out today? Mm-hmm. It's really over. What good is she doing by not being gracious about it and getting out now and putting her support behind Obama and moving on?
All right, well, I'll just give a short answer and then you can argue with me and I'll, come back at you. But, the race is not over. There are still probably 5 million people who haven't voted. And we have not yet decided what we're going to do with Michigan or Florida. And the superdelegates haven't made up their mind. This is only May. We have plenty of time. And there's no reason for her not to finish the race. She'll decide.
Is there a reason for her to stay in?
Yeah.
I keep reading, she has a right to go through it and so forth. But I'd like to focus on what good does she think she's doing? She's not going to win. She's hogging the stage for what seem to be selfish or even irrational purposes. I don't understand what is even motivating her and why people are supporting her in doing this at this point. Now, I thought in our previous dialogue, she was right to keep going because it had been so long since he'd won. And since there was all of this new material about Jeremiah Wright and Bill Ayers and so forth coming out, and he had gotten so many votes before he'd really been tested, when people were just high on the whole idea of hope or whatever it was. But now that he's gone through this period where she's hung on and he's been tested and he's survived all that, I think the good that she's capable of doing, I think she already did it in putting him to that test. I don't see the good of her staying in at this point, unless you see it as good to get John McCain elected.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I think she's in this race to win. I think at the point she believes that she cannot win, should that point come, she'll drop out. But I don't think that point is here. As for the testing with respect to Jeremiah Wright and things, last night we had 2 primaries, North Carolina and Indiana. There was no question North Carolina was going to go for him. But a big factor in both North Carolina and Indiana were the large amount of early voters. And those people, many of them voted before this whole Jeremiah Wright thing happened. So I don't know that last night's elections or a referendum that Barack Obama passed the Jeremiah Wright, William Ayers issue. I mean, to me, it wasn't an issue in the first place. It's certainly not a reason I think people shouldn't vote for Obama. But apparently rural voters and others, do have a problem with it. And I'm just saying that because of the early vote, we don't really know that he has so-called passed the test. But the real thing is that, if you can't disenfranchise 2.3 million voters, we don't have elections based on 48 states. And if you count those voters in Florida and Michigan who voted for Hillary, she says that she, still has a chance of becoming the nominee, particularly if the superdelegates believe that she is more electable in November. So she's not hurting anybody by staying in. I'd also point out that this extended race between her and Obama is drawing thousands of new voters to the Democratic Party. It's good for the Democratic Party. And, the polls show that the voters want the race between them to continue. So I don't think she's hurting anybody, and I think she has a right to take this until the last person's voted and until someone has reached the magic threshold number of delegates, which, by the way, she now says is 2209 as opposed to the 2025 because she's now counting Florida and Michigan in there.
Well, of course, she'll count anything that she thinks will work for her side, but I think that if you look at what people will accept and what will seem right to people, with Obama's lead in the pledged delegates, they are going to expect the superdelegates to get behind that and give it to him. They can't take it away from him unless something really bad had come out about him. If the Jeremiah Wright story had played differently, if he hadn't handled that well, I think there might have been an argument to say that the superdelegates need to exercise this supervening judgment and overcome the pledged delegates. But I just don't see that material as having developed. And that being the case, they're going to have to give it to it. Well, it's true that there's this theoretical possibility that they could do something else, but they can't do that. And they're not going to do that. So what good is she doing? Since we know that. Okay,
here's the thing. First of all, I disagree he handled Wright well, but let's get what the good for Obama that comes with her staying in the race is this. If Obama supporters or the superdelegates or anyone else force Hillary out of the race now, Hillary supporters are not going to flock to Barack Obama. On the other hand, if everybody waits and just till June 3rd, when every state has voted, if Hillary at that point cannot get the nomination with the numbers and the superdelegates and she decides to drop out, you will find Hillary supporters saying, okay, we had a contest, Hillary lost, now I'm going to get behind the Democratic nominee. But if you force her out of the race now, before everybody has voted, before Michigan and Florida is counted, and before the superdelegates have weighed in, that's, in their view, the Hillary supporters, forcing her out, taking the vote from her, and that's not fair. And so for the sake of the Democratic Party, Hillary needs to be able to stay in this, and the voters all need to weigh in, and we have to resolve Michigan and Florida.
But there is no way to force her out. You're right that she has a right to do it. She can do it. She can make the world her personal stage and fulfill herself reaching the end of the line and going the distance. But she doesn't have to do it. And my question is, why doesn't she drop out? Why doesn't she decide to withdraw graciously, magnanimously, and back the person who is going to be the Democratic nominee and throw all her support to him?
Because he's not the best thing for her to do. Coronated him. He is not the nominee yet. And, our convention is in August. We haven't finished voting. So, she doesn't have to be gracious and withdraw now.
We know what's going to happen. No, even if you take the most extremely pro-Hillary version of the things that could happen in the few states that are left, she still has no hope of winning unless she does something major with getting superdelegates to go against the pledged delegates, or getting the Florida-Michigan thing to be a whole big controversy, what would that drag out into the convention? And there would be so much hard feeling produced by that. I just don't understand why she wants to do that to her party.
Because there's 2.3 million people who voted in Florida and Michigan, and it's not fair that their votes are not going to be counted.
Is it all going to come down to that, arguing the Michigan-Florida thing?
She's
going to stay in to push that?
It's going to come down to that, and then and the corollary to that is, if you count those votes, she's making the argument that she is more electable in November, and she's making the argument that she actually will be leading in the popular vote, and so we should wait and see what Kentucky and West Virginia and Oregon and The other, North Dakota or South Dakota, whichever it is, and the other states weigh in. So,
we can pretty much project how all of those.
The superdelegates, they get to make up their mind. I hope that they just stay quiet until June 3rd now, and let everybody finish voting, and let's let the Rules and Bylaw Committee do what they're going to do with Florida and Michigan, because everybody needs to feel that the process is fair. Because if Obama gets the nominations, Hillary supporters need to come over and vote for Obama. And if they feel that she was railroaded out of the race because they didn't count Florida,
but it wouldn't be railroading.
It's not.
My point is, she can't be forced out. She can't be railroaded. She can, on her own, do what's right, or what her lack of money may force her to do, and end it and do it in a way that doesn't leave the Hillary supporters feeling aggrieved, but that reunites the party. Why shouldn't she do that as her last gesture rather than going down fighting on a lost cause?
Well, she will do
Why
that.
Does she want to enter?
She will do that after June 3rd if that's what the final votes show. But Hillary supporters want her to stay in.
People are pretty sick of this process, and June 3rd is a long way away.
In 1992, Bill Clinton didn't get the nomination until June 2nd. It's really not that long. The convention isn't until August. So, let's let the voters have their say, and, Hillary supporters want her to stay in until everybody's voted and until the superdelegates weigh in after the vote is totaled, and all 50 states are counted.
So you're right there with Rush Limbaugh on the idea that she should stay in and bloody him up. Because, Operation Chaos, the Rush Limbaugh endeavor, Rush Limbaugh being the famous radio show host. By the way, I was born on the same day in history as Rush Limbaugh, so I feel a special bond to the man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, January 12th, 1951. We were both born on that date.
Wow.
So I feel like I share his references or whatever. In fact, when you mentioned Hammond, Indiana, I thought about the great radio personality Gene Shepard, who I always listened to back in the 60s. And I've always thought that Rush Limbaugh probably did too, because his delivery and his comic style, to some extent, reminds me of Gene Shepard. But anyway, so I listen to Rush Limbaugh. I don't agree with everything that he says, but I find him very entertaining. And he's sort of a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of the things that one puts up with in the media. He's funny. And Operation Chaos is funny, but does anyone who actually likes the Democrats want Operation Chaos to succeed? Operation Chaos being Rush Limbaugh's effort to get Republicans to vote for Hillary in order to help the Republican cause, to help John McCain, on the theory that John McCain is taking this lofty attitude that he's too much of a gentleman to actually attack Barack Obama. He's above it all, so somebody has to do it. So who better than Hillary? Keep her campaign alive so that she'll attack Barack Obama. It's the best hope that the Republicans have to win in November, is to keep Hillary going so that she can attack the person who is going to be the nominee. So you're in line with Rush Limbaugh. Doesn't that bother you?
No, I'm not in line with Rush Limbaugh. And I thought the purpose, apparently the purpose of Operation Chaos has changed, because I thought initially when he was doing it in Ohio, it was because he believed that Barack Obama would be a stronger candidate against John McCain. So he wanted McCain to run against Hillary, thinking McCain would have an easier time beating Hillary than he would Barack
No, I don't
Obama.
think that was ever the idea. I think it was always that we wanted the Democratic battle to keep going on. It didn't matter which side won, just keep it going so that they'll keep fighting, so that there will be chaos. And meanwhile, the Republicans will sail along and avoid the fight, and they'll knock each other down to size. And in fact, he was gloating just, I think, yesterday that Hillary Clinton had succeeded in that. That back when Obama was sailing toward the nomination, he seemed like the Messiah. Everybody thought he was, superhuman. There was all this glowing stuff that looks a little bizarre looking back at it now. And she cut him down to size. She made him a mere human.
Well, I don't think that Rush really had any effect on the election, okay? And particularly as to last night, and let me tell you why. Yeah. As I said, there's a lot of, you think that he's doing this to have Hillary bloody Obama up, and maybe that's true. But if you read the interviews in the newspapers with the people who listen to Rush, just as many of them said, well, I'm going to vote for Obama because I really think that Hillary is the stronger candidate in November. So if Obama is the candidate, then I think McCain will have an easier time winning. And what
they're not taking their orders properly from their commander.
Well, you have a lot of crossover voting, and that's one of the problems with these primaries. I, for one, am against Republicans and independents voting in the Democratic primary. I think people have a right to vote in the general election, but when you're talking about the Democratic nominee, it should be chosen by Democrats, and if you're not going to bother to belong to the party, then why should you have a say in who the nominee is? And so what Rush Limbaugh is doing is just exploiting the opportunity in these states that have open primaries and caucuses to try and get crossover voters, people who will become Democrats for a day but never are going to vote for the Democratic nominee in November.
Some of them might be independents, so would you exclude them? You only want hardcore Democrats? You don't want
It's not a question of hardcore. If you're an independent, you're not a registered Democrat. Then if you want to say in the Democratic nominee, I think that you should be a Democrat, yeah. It's not a question of how much of a Democrat. Register as a Democrat.
Well, it depends on the individual state. They may have different requirements. I think he's going to the extreme of saying that Republicans should actually change their registration simply to do this. So obviously those people are completely insincere. And we have no idea how many people are actually following this. Now, if they are, it undercuts Hillary's victory.
Well, last night they were saying in Indiana, or I forget, it was either Indiana or North Carolina, I forget which one, and I think it was Indiana, but it was 11,000 Republicans crossed over to vote in the Democratic primary. And half of those voted for Hillary and half voted for Obama. So I think it was 5.5%. And the thing is you have no way of knowing whether Rush Limbaugh inspired those people. You don't know whether these are longtime Republicans who are finally sick of 8 years of George Bush and look at John McCain as just being another 4 years of George Bush. Or whether these are people that were truly moved by either Hillary or Obama. Yeah. So, what may have happened is both Democrats got some votes out of it. But to say, I honestly don't think he's having much of an impact. I think it's for ratings. I think he's an entertainer. And he's trying to be entertaining.
Well, I do think that he's using it for entertainment, and it's just a comic riff that he's doing that interacts with actual real news, and he makes big claims about how it's working and so on. That doesn't mean he actually thinks it's working. It certainly doesn't mean that it is working. It's just the thing that he's doing to keep talking about the election because that's in the news. It won't go away, and you have to say something about it, but...
to be honest, I prefer what he's doing to, what some of the other right-wing pundits are doing on TV, the way they just keep bringing up all this Reverend Wright and Bill Ayers stuff, and it's like, give it a rest already. They're just making these baseless attacks on Obama with it. I fear that they are convincing their right-wing voters.
Even though you support Hillary Clinton, you think the way Reverend Wright was used was wrong and that shouldn't have been done.
I think the way it's being used on television on the cable news shows by the right-wing talk show hosts is wrong, yeah. And as I said earlier, I don't have a problem with Obama's relationship with Reverend Wright, and I don't have a problem with his relationship with Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers has done a lot of good things in the last 20 years, particularly with respect to juveniles accused of crime. And, Obama worked on some of those issues with him, and I applaud both of their efforts on that. So, I don't have a problem with it. Do I recognize that the rural voters and some of the blue collar or the voters may have a problem with it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's wrong of the white ring talk radio and talk cable to exploit it and to keep playing it over and over again.
I think it's justified because we don't know that much about Obama. He hasn't been around that long. And there's a question about him, which to me is the biggest question, which is he a left-winger?
Well,
right?
I don't think he's a left-winger.
He seems to be, he's got a reputation as being the most liberal member of the Senate. How liberal is he? Is he an extremist? Is he a political extremist? What's really going on there? He has this very calm exterior. He has this very abstract way of speaking. what's really in there. We need to know, and we have to use the data points that we have.
You know,
and the 20-year association with Wright and the elaborate association with Ayers as well. However, it's, I don't know how detailed that is, but those are data points, and we have very few real data points. I think those things matter. I need to be convinced that he's not a political extremist. I could very easily see myself voting for Obama. I voted for him in the Wisconsin primary. And, if the election were today between the three that are left standing, I might very well vote for Obama. But I need to be assured that he is not a left-wing ideologue or someone who would go too far to the left. Now, you probably would like someone who would go pretty far to the left, so that's not a problem.
Let me answer you, okay? Because I have spent hours and hours on Lexis and Nexus researching his record, and I can tell you, I don't view him as a liberal at all. He's not liberal enough for me. Of course, Hillary wouldn't be either, but I can tell you that I don't find anything liberal about him, and particularly on crime issues, which I'm most concerned about. He is just not... his record is just not that much of a liberal. I don't know where people get all this from, except that they look up, they Google and see that some liberal group gave him a liberal rating. And so they go, oh, he's the most liberal senator in the Senate. And if you actually research his record and look at his voting position on bills while in the Illinois Senate and while in Congress, in the U.S. Senate, it's just not there. And the major thing about him, and one of the things I don't like, is that I think is going to be too much of a compromiser. He frequently talks about how some liberal issue is not going to be worth expending the political capital on it. And he really views things through that lens. And I'm afraid that everything bill is going to end up being a compromise, which
you're bringing out what I like about him, which is I think that he's not very political. I think he's politically ambitious, and maybe he's been very much of a stealth person who hasn't revealed what he really thinks. But he may not think all that much other than just, we need to solve problems. I'm a smart person with a good temperament for the presidency. I'll listen to my advisors and I'll figure out solutions. I'll be pragmatic. I'll bring people together. So I think he may just be a rational, moderate, not a hothead at all.
Well, I think you're right.
And I think that's what I like about it.
Well, and that's what I don't like about him. I want a fighter, and I'm tired of 7 years of George Bush, and I want somebody who's going to fight to reverse all the damage that was done. I think that fighter is Hillary. I think he's a compromiser. But again, so if I'm reassuring you that he's not liberal, then great. Then he's got another vote if he's the nominee in November.
It seems to me that if you don't like Bush and you think he's gone too far to one side, the solution isn't to swing the pendulum all the way over to the other side. It's to bring in somebody who's got equilibrium and moderation and pragmatism and a willingness to listen and find solutions. That's what he's offering himself as. I would like that to be true.
Yeah, and see, I wouldn't. I mean, I think we shouldn't have, we should go back to way before it was, the pendulum has swung way far to the right over the last couple of, since the 90s, and we need to move it back. And it actually started moving towards the center with Bill Clinton, and it was to the right with George Bush one before him. I want to go all the way back to the left.
Post-partisan. He's trying to get us off the pendulum. Not just go to one side and then we'll be back on the other side. We should get beyond that. I mean, maybe that's a pipe dream, but that's what he's offering to do. I think that's better than going to the other extreme.
Well, I would much rather go left.
Yeah, I know. Talk left. You've committed to that. It would ruin your site name. But I wanted to bring up this article that got tons of links a couple of days ago. That was it was actually in the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. Michelle Obama. Here's the headline: Michelle Obama: Barack has hit boiling point. And everybody said, but that's not in quotes. And if you read the article, there's nothing in it that really supports that quote. People want to portray him as someone who has this false, calm exterior, but inside is seething, that he's really inside an angry person. And I just don't see any material in anything that she said that supports that. And yet last time I looked, there were 78 links to this article, all kinds of blog posts talking about how Barack Obama is an angry man, and especially how Michelle Obama is this angry woman, and specifically angry black woman. And it seems to me to just tap into and reflect a prejudice that people see a black man or a black woman and they assume they're angry, and if they're not angry enough, they must just be hiding it. And they're grasping at nothing to portray him that way. I'm quite offended by that.
I haven't read that article, so I can't, I can't really take a position on it. I don't see Barack Obama or Michelle Obama as angry. I see them as believing that they are going to be these agents of change. My response to that is change how, change what, but I certainly don't have any animosity towards them because I think they're angry. I think, he stepped in it with his bitter comment, and he's still working his way out of that one. And I think maybe this meme that he's angry is stemming from the use of his word bitter, but he has said that was a poor choice.
But that was saying that other people were bitter. He doesn't want people to be bitter. He's not saying he's bitter. He's saying he perceives other people as being bitter. And I think that he was offering to them to get them out of that place of bitterness and to move on to a better place. So I don't think that shows that the bitter Americans comment that he made, I don't think it shows that he's bitter. I think it shows that he tends to look at other people and see them as bitter, which kind of shows that he has a pretty low tolerance for bitterness, for anger. I think he's I think he's almost at the other extreme. I've been calling him phlegmatic. I think he sort of doesn't have enough passion, maybe to really, I don't know if phlegmatic is a good character style to be president. Maybe it is, but I think he is sort of reflective and calm. I think that I don't see anger in that at all. I see him as maybe someone who's averse to anger and doesn't want people to be in disagreement when in fact people do need to be in disagreement. Let me just read you the little bit from that article that shows you the only thing that Michelle Obama really said. This is from the article. Mrs. Obama told a rally in Durham, North Carolina that only her husband's desire to change U.S. politics had helped him control his feelings. Now that's paraphrasing. Here's the quote. Barack is always thinking 3 steps ahead. What do we need to do to make change? And in the context of all of this stuff that was going on with respect to Jeremiah Wright, she says that he was thinking, and now this is a quote, I can't let my ego, my anger, my frustration get in the way of my ultimate goal. So it was just a reference that he had ego, anger, and frustration in seeing how the Jeremiah Wright story was continuing to play even after he'd made his Philadelphia speech, which was designed to lift us to a higher place and bring us all together. So he didn't like that. But what evidence is that he's some kind of a hothead? And there were tons of blog posts where people were saying, oh, I thought McCain was the hothead, but look at Obama. His wife says he's a boil. But that was all just paraphrasing by this article. And she had said really practically nothing other than that, he thinks ahead and he processes his anger into trying to figure out how to achieve good ends. So I don't see him as being an angry person at all. And I think there's something a little really racist about the processing of that quote into this idea that he's an angry man and that she's an angry woman.
Well, I think they have a right to be angry at the way, or frustrated at the way the focus of his candidacy has switched from his idea about change to his support for his former pastor and his bitter comments. And I think she meant what she said. It sounds to me like she meant what she said. They're angry that they can't really respond the way they'd like to because in the context of a political campaign, you have to watch what you say. I don't see anything. I don't see anybody accusing them. I don't see anything racist in that. But I also would tend to agree that he is not, that his personality tends to be more, you say phlegmatic, I would call it professorial or philosophical.
Professorial? Right. And then the Philadelphia speech was professorial. And I think that when she said that that he thought I can't let my ego, my anger, my frustration get in the way of the ultimate goal, I think what she was doing was not actually revealing that there's an angry man that she knows about, and she's letting it slip. I think it's by design to try to make us think that he really is a passionate man who really does get angry, because they realized the way the right story continued to play after the Philadelphia speech. I think they realized that the American people wanted to see him get angry, and they were dissatisfied with him. They felt there was something missing because he didn't show passion and anger there. And now there's this retread, the new speech, and her new presentation was to say, he really does have these passionate emotions, and he really is angry to hear the things that Wright said.
Well, I think what she was saying is he was angry about that issue. I don't think that means he's an angry man in general. And, so I guess I just don't see it as being as significant as you do. I mean, I make a big...
But what I think is significant is the way the newspaper, what was it, the Telegraph, portrayed it, paraphrased it, headlined it, and the way lots of bloggers picked up the story and got into this idea of presenting him, spinning him as the angry man. And I think that is a manifestation of racism, that people look at a black man and he doesn't seem to be the least bit angry, and they think he's an angry man. Or they look at her and portraying her as an angry woman is done even to a greater extreme. I saw her when I was in Madison, I think it was the day before the Wisconsin primary. I dropped in on a speech that she was giving just because I was right in the vicinity and you could walk right in, so I walked right in. And I heard her give, a whole long speech. I thought she was wonderful, gracious, witty, and it happened to be one of the speeches where she made that comment that for the first time in my life, I'm proud to be an American. And I didn't even notice that phrase. I thought it was a wonderful speech. I thought she would be a fantastically inspiring first lady. It never crossed my mind that this is an angry woman. So I'm really disconcerted to see people portraying her that way.
I just don't get that sense that people are going to look at him as being an angry man, and I'm so much more focused on his policies and what kind of president he would be, and how unhappy I am to just hear hope and change, hope and change, hope and change, because I just don't think that's going to carry it.
Well, I mean,
and I don't know what
the whole thing is very emotional. So this concentration on what are his emotions, I mean, it's sort of like he laid the groundwork for that by being all about stimulating our emotions. And so that, there are two sides to that coin. His opponents have to play that back at him. If he's going to make it seem like he's this lofty, inspirational character, they're entitled to make it seem like he's totally not. And that it can't all just be a big policy discussion. And the fact is he and Hillary Clinton aren't different enough on policy for them to keep talking about it.
That's right. The difference is that she has a plan for everything. She's a problem solver. She's a fighter. And she has concrete solutions that everybody can relate to. He comes out with hope and change and says, look on my website and you'll find my plans. And the plans aren't as deep, aren't as specific. I think, for those of us who want something concrete, who want to be able to say, we know what this person's going to do if they're elected, he is, he's more enigmatic.
Well, I mean, on the positive side of that, I think that what you're calling enigmatic might be an openness, a willingness to listen, to actually look at what the problem is and how to solve it. Whereas I think she tends to have the reputation of someone who will lock on to what she wants to do, to propose something specific, and then not to listen to why it wouldn't work, like the interest rate freeze, and some of her ideas are just... and then the way she handled the healthcare plan during the Clinton era, which is the main thing that we know about her, that she seems to be someone who maybe is too rigid in her thinking, unwilling to listen to people who disagree with her, and things that remind me of George Bush. Why wouldn't that be on the top of the list?
Well, because we know exactly where she stands. She doesn't backtrack. She doesn't waffle. And she lets you know what her plan is. She has said with respect to Iraq, she'll listen to her Joint Chiefs of Staff, even though she's going to start, bringing troops home within 60 days. Her health care plan this time around benefits from the experience she had the first time around. I don't think she's as dogmatic as you're saying, but the bottom line is there's no surprise. With Obama, he starts out very often on some issues as an absolutist on one position, and then over time it gets modified until the point where you really can't figure out where he stands, and you're not sure what he would do once he got into the White House. At least with her, we know.
So, we're presented with people who are really probably not that different on policy, right, but who have a very different temperament and a different style of thinking.
And one other thing.
If you had to throw your lot in, if you're going to say, I want this person to make judgments for me, which of those two styles would you prefer? I got to say Obama would be the better. Okay, but you're
leaving out one important factor, though, and that is the experience and the ability to get things done in Washington. She, I think, is going to be more able to effectuate the policies, including the ones she and Obama agree upon, get them past Congress than he is. She's just got more clout. She knows her way around better. And, the presidency shouldn't be a training ground.
Well, how do you figure that he ran his campaign so much better than hers? He
ran it, or his campaign advisors ran it?
Well, no president is doing it alone either. You have to assemble your advisors. He had a better group of people. They made a better plan. They played it out much better than she did. Hers was one bumble after another, including the overwhelmingly important failure to have any plan for after Super Tuesday. It wasn't run well. He was heads and shoulders above her in terms of managing the campaign. So that's the one thing the two of us have really just done in front of us, if we're to judge them by that.
Well, I want to judge by who's going to be able to get the policies that the Democrats care about through Congress, such as universal health care, getting us out of Iraq, and all the other, preserving Social Security. And I just think that she has she's more adept at working with Congress. He wants to keep talking about change, bringing change to Washington. What does that mean? We have a system where congressmen get elected every 2 years, senator every 6. They're going to be concerned about getting themselves reelected. What kind of change are you going to bring? What's he talking about?
Personally, I don't particularly want those things to happen anyway, so that's another reason why I'm sort of satisfied with the moderate, that I actually think these changes are too extreme, and I don't necessarily want them. So you might not want to listen to me if you want them more. If your position is, where should a person who actually is left-wing, where should that person go? You say Hillary.
And not because of policy differences, because neither of them, in my view, are particularly liberal, and their policies are very similar on almost every issue. It's a question of who will be the fighter and who can get it through.
Hey, speaking of balance and moderation and looking at the clock, I want to bring up the subject of John McCain's speech yesterday about the federal judges and the kinds of judges that he would appoint. We're both lawyers, so we like to get a little law in here at some point. So did you read his speech? Do you have any response to that?
You said what? I'm sorry.
Did you listen to or read McCain's speech? I think it was designed to assure people that, first of all, that he had a well-worked out judicial philosophy that was correct, and that he would appoint judges who manifested that philosophy.
I did get to read articles about what he said. I didn't actually hear his words, but I read enough quotes. It's just more of the same old, more of Bush, more of, anybody who doesn't vote the conservative way on the bench is a judicial activist,
Right, exactly.
Whereas I look at it and think, here's a guy who's just going to give us more right-wing ideologues when he gets on the bench. And we already have enough of them, and he gets elected, then, you can say goodbye to the Supreme Court for the next 40 years.
Well, I think that's what he wants people to think, because he has to round up some votes from people who really want the court to go conservative. But I think, first of all, he'll have to work with the Senate. He can only appoint people that will get through. And I'm really not that sure that he wants to give the 4 conservative members of the court their 5th vote so that they don't have to talk to the other side. I think we have lived with a balanced court for so many years and that the changes that we saw with the new appointments from George Bush didn't really change that balance because of who was retired. Who retired?
Oh, Alito.
So we were no, because O'Connor. So it moved a little to the right because O'Connor was replaced by Alito, but Rehnquist being replaced by Roberts didn't change that much. We still have a need for the conservatives to attract a moderate to get a majority, and if a new opening came up and one of the liberals or Justice Kennedy were to leave and that seat had to be filled, then I think it would have the potential for giving the fifth vote to the conservatives. We haven't seen that yet. That would radically change this state of this sort of stasis, this balance we've had over a long period of time. We've become very accustomed to it. I don't know if McCain would be willing to give them that vote, as opposed to put someone in who would be more moderate, who would keep things in this kind of familiar balance that we've known. I think that the really strong conservative court that he seems to be trying to assure us he would produce, I tend to doubt that he would produce it. You know, I mean, I understand why people are who want a liberal court are afraid he would produce it, but I tend to doubt that he would.
You know, and with the time that the Alito and Roberts appointments were going on, there were a lot of people who said that in order for George Bush to get the evangelical vote the last time around, he had to promise them he would put a conservative on the court. And look, we got conservatives. I would not put it past John McCain to do this, make the same promise, if in fact Bush made that promise, and promise the evangelical right that if he gets elected, he will put another conservative on the court. You know, that's politics. I think John McCain is all about politics. And
right, but he's not going to run for re-election, he's told us. Once he has to say the things he needs to say to get those votes. Once he's in a position to do it, he will pick people. And I think even George Bush picked people. I don't think that John Roberts was as strongly conservative as Scalia or Thomas. And McCain, in making his speech yesterday, when he tried to say, these are the kind of judges I will produce, he said Roberts and Alito, and he said my friend William Rehnquist, but he didn't say Scalia and he didn't say Thomas. So I think he is at one remove from the most strong conservative position. And I tend to think that he would produce someone who was more in the Roberts model, who once he got on the court would perform a function similar to Justice Kennedy's. That's just my prediction.
And and I think that, you know, in addition to the Supreme Court, we have to consider all the federal judges that are going to be appointed, both at the district court level and the appellate level. And to me, if there is one reason to vote Democratic in November, other than the war in Iraq, it is the state of our judiciary, and that we just cannot afford another 4 years of conservative judicial appointments to our federal bench.
Well, I mean, I think people are less likely to notice that, but it's very important that you're talking about people who aren't going to be that perfectly screened to be exactly what you want, the way you do with the Supreme Court, that there are lots of judges who will be appointed, and they may take positions that certainly that you as a criminal defense lawyer would not like.
Yeah, but I mean,
but I don't know if you can get voters
to pay there's no guarantee that the liberal judges will rule the way I would like either, but at least it's not going to be completely lopsided.
Now, you know, the last time we dialogued, we talked about the lethal injection case, and it did come out, and, you know, your side lost, so I wasn't surprised by that. I guess you weren't either, right?
Well, I was disappointed by it, and I'm much more concerned about the effect of the case now that executions have already resumed. Last night we had the first one in Georgia, and at the same time we have someone else released from North Carolina last week who had been on death row and turned out to be innocent. So to me, the issue now is we really have to do something going forward. It was great not to have executions during the time that the Supreme Court was considering the cruel and unusual punishment case, but we have to do something else now. If there are a lot of executions going forward, it will highlight the issue in a way that might have some effect on the election. Everything goes back to the election, but you know, people will see how those things are handled and maybe have some opinion about what kind of judges they want to see appointed. You know, the problem is that all three candidates support the death penalty.
Right? You know, people support the death penalty.
That's true, they do. But you know, and so you know, removing it to the issue of, well, what about making sure that it's not applied in an arbitrary or discriminatory fashion and that we don't kill the innocent.
Yeah.
You know, I think Obama and Hillary have both been leaders and strong supporters of legislation in the past on those issues. I don't know about John McCain. I don't know that it's ever even crossed his radar screen.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, and you know, the gun case has yet to come out, and the voter ID case also is having an effect on the election. But I'm looking at the clock and seeing we're getting close to the hour.
Okay.
And you just heard my buzzer. Someone is trying to reach me at this point. So, is this too an abrupt a way to end the dialogue, or?
Nope, let's just say goodbye
can we
and
just
see you
wrap
guys
it
next
right
time.
up? Okay. Great talking to you.
What do we do? Do we just click stop now?
We're just going to say goodbye, and then we're going to press stop, hopefully at just about exactly the same time, like right now.